mute your mics. I'm going to start. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is 7 o'clock on Monday, November 22nd. It's been a tough and heavy day for our neighboring community today, as well as for some of our very own families here in the school district. So as we head into a moment of silence, I just ask that we use this moment of silence to focus and pray or whatever you want to do for the Waukesha families, all of the individuals and organizations, and just the community that's involved, as well as everyone that's involved here in Mukwonago as well. So if you would join me in that moment of silence. Thank you. And if you would join me in a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could have roll call.
Erica Connor.
Here.
Mary DeMoore here. Joel Frericks. Andy Mankey is excused. Art Schneider.
Here.
Vito Schwartz is excused. Craig Verts.
Here.
Jill Werner.
Here.
And Cherry Winchowski is excused. And we have Michael and Kayla. You could say here.
This is an open meeting and has been noted as such. We have two citizens' comments that we'll start with. We have Karen Talicki. You can come on up to the table.
I do, members of the board. Can you hear me okay?
Just maybe pull it a little closer.
Mind you, I have the highest respect for all of you to make the right decisions at the right times. I typically am a very quiet person, and I'm also very much a data geek. So I'm a surgical nurse. I have been for 22 years, and now currently my current position is an ultrasound nurse. Mom of 2 teenagers, mentor to many lost souls. I do have some experience in different classes and understanding a lot of the technology and a lot of the microbiology.
Excuse me, ma'am. Can everybody hear back there? Can everybody hear? Okay.
I am requesting that the school board provide a statement on the proof, the data of the COVID-19 PCR testing on its integrity, reliance, and validity of the test, as well as the safety. I have sent you all an email regarding that, and there are numerous lawyers with data stating how ethylene oxide is dangerous to many children, or just people in general, to the body. It is a form of cancer-causing agent, and I do want that to be investigated on its safety. If that means that it has to go through numerous tests, then it should be going through numerous tests before it is ever used on people. We use that in the OR, and it is a hazard, it is toxic, it is a pesticide. Next, I want to understand why the school board is acting as medical professionals and having testing sites at schools. It is unlawful to advise private health care of students by PCR testing requirements and adapting them into graduation requirements too, in developing programs for requirements in your CNA program that you all discussed last time. Educational systems do not have a medical licensure, and to devise any medical procedures by staff and requesting requires a medical license and supervision of those procedures. It is unfathomable that this is in discussion of last month's meeting. Future programs suggested must not be invited into schools for safety and integrity of student systems. Biological labs have handling procedures at medical facilities, and that's where it should stay. I will also point out that programs for graduation requirements that could be limiting to students with religious exemptions on topics of testing or mandating vaccinations will be discriminatory requirements for graduation. This action will be subject to and may have even legal implications. Participation for graduation requirements in any field of study must open practices that are non-discriminatory, non-biased, and non-coercive to be lawful. A CNA program with PCR testing sites will violate this. And there are many educated adults who can clearly see the data coming out from many studies on this. There are empirical studies of COVID-19 treatments approved by ivermectin that exist in the NIH database. And there is a site I gave to you. There's more information, and I will be happy to provide that for you. Ivermectin helps in reducing hospital stay. It astounds me that educated officials reject this information, even so more that high-level medical physicians refuse this particular care to people. It is costing people lives and livelihoods. Discovery of ivermectin won a Nobel Prize. Research must reach validity. Truth is a celebration of the successes we experience together as Nobel Prize winners did it for developing cures. A perfect example is my ivermectin, how it cured diseases and helps now with COVID-19 beautifully. With treatments available and approved NIH vaccines are no longer needed, and nor will they be lawful if mandated. Thus, we need to eliminate quarantine measures fully, because there has reached like a point where if you can't prove that the virus was sequenced at all, why are you quarantining? Last, I want to point out that the VAERS data was atrocious. I sent that list to you. There are 818, actually it's more than that now with the new data. So an immediate full review of the topics we have evidential studies for: the harmful effects of face masks, and we don't have to talk about face masks, the validity of the PCR testing of students as harmful carcinogenic swabs of ethylene oxide, and the efficacy of quarantining measures do not work historically. Testing of ineffective is completely ineffective, turning 97% false positives. The proof of a fully sequenced virus of COVID-19 variant was never found, and if it is, please provide me documentation. Legally, this board has a responsibility to we the people in acting in accordance to the Bill of Rights in Title 18, Section 242. Any coercion, bullying, discrimination to any student means that it could violate this section and result in permanent harm or even death of a student. And if that ever happens, I hope not, because I hope that we're all very smart people. So I won't further that and discuss that. But it would be subject to full review because we have to hold love, respect, and education. And it has to be free of COVID-19 variant regulations or mandates immediately. Also, experiments through deception, such as the vaccinations on children, are unlawful. We are caring people as a whole community and loving each other, and through all of this, we can unite together. And what holds us together to be great people are loving decisions with constitutional freedoms. Be informed. I ask the board to uphold 3 actions. Throw out any COVID-19 policy changes into your policy for the teachers and staff. I fully reviewed this information and allow all named COVID-19 and any illness to be handled by medical facilities, only as with the past flus and illnesses that have been handled, never on campus. I ask all requirements for COVID-19 testing of anyone, especially our children, to be halted immediately, and to never have children met with discriminatory health measures or mandates. With these actions includes the quarantine measures, which are baseless and stated above, and are to be discussed and ended. Our school system needs to regain on educational successes and reunite our children again to focus on learning and creative thinking. It's time to step away from the desire to focus on policy measures of medical processes and illnesses that have been around for centuries and not a part of education of a child and are simply useless distractions to learning in the classroom. Truth is what makes everything normal again. God be with you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mark Summers.
Good evening, y'all. I think you all know who I am. And I had sent an email, and it echoes everything that Karen just said. So I echo everything that she just said. And what I would like to do is read the board powers out of our policy manual. Power of the school board extends to those matters expressly or implicitly granted by the Constitution, statute, local charter, or ordinance, or other law, including the power to do all things reasonable to promote the cause of education. Within this, it doesn't say anything medical. There is nothing medical on here that says the board has any power to make medical decisions. So, that means our COVID mitigation plan, those are medical decisions. Those are to be made by parents and their medical providers, no one else. So like I said, I echo what Karen is saying, that the COVID mitigation plan needs to be scrapped, needs to be rescinded. There's no cause for it. Regardless of the data that keeps getting thrown out, we can't trust the data that's been stated by the CDC, and I think we all know that. Some of us really know that, and others are just closed-minded to it. We need to stop listening to mainstream media. They don't know a thing that's going on, and they just keep the fear-mongering going. We're done with the fear-mongering. We as parents are done. We're done with discrimination. That COVID plan, that has discrimination in it. It's rewarding people that get a shot. Should I go on about the shot? mRNA, gene therapy. What does that do to your immune system? I would like somebody to say, well, maybe that should be researched more before we reward students for getting a shot and discriminating against those that know better and don't have it, and have parents that care about them and say, no, I'm not going to have my children subjected to an experimental drug. Should we go on about how the vaccine definition has changed? I mean, that's right on the CDC website. How many times has it changed in just the last few years? 3 times, just to meet the narrative that we have right now. It is not a vaccine. It is gene-altering therapy. Let's get that straight. So, rewarding students for getting it so they don't have to be forced quarantined, not ideal. All students should be treated equally. That's what we have. That's what we are, the United States of America. We don't allow discrimination, especially medical discrimination. I know in our bylaws for this board, that's in there. We're not supposed to discriminate, right? We're not supposed to discriminate. And we also had that for the masks. I won't even bring that up, but that I want to point that out, that we weren't supposed to discriminate against people that wore or didn't wear. The same thing with the experimental shot. We shouldn't discriminate one student from another. We shouldn't say, oh, because you have this, you want to call it a vaccine? I won't call it a vaccine, but just to entertain you, I'll call it a vaccine. You have a vaccine, but you don't. Oh, you can come back to school as long as you don't have symptoms, but we don't care if you have symptoms or not. You got to quarantine for 10 days. How is that fair? That's not fair. The COVID mitigation plan needs to be scrapped. It's not ideal. It sure as heck is not in this manual. This is the board powers. Nobody here has the power over my children or anybody else's children that's in this room or anybody in the school district. I can tell you with utmost certainty that I will not comply nor consent to this plan. And if I have to take legal action, I will. There's plenty of parents in this school district that will do the same. So let's do the responsible thing. Let's get it on the agenda, and let's get it taken off, because we are a community, and we need to work together, not discriminate and divide. That's just meeting the narrative. So I'm asking this board to put it on the agenda. Actually, I'm requiring it. I don't want to sit here going, you work for me. We all work for each other. We all are supposed to help each other. You're just representing us. Let's get it on the agenda and let's get this thing wiped out. If you want to come up with a plan that has a certain amount of percentage of kids sick, take the COVID part out of it and just have a percentage and say, okay, we shut down the classroom if we hit this percentage. I think most parents are agreeable to that. But when it comes to making decisions and then calling their student in sick and then getting the third degree about what symptoms, and then they go to their list. If they have something on that list, oh, you need a test to come back. How many schools have done that? How many schools here in this district? All of them have done that. Have I lucked out in some ways? Yes, because my son, he likes to play that game, and they got wise to it. So there is, people are human. They can see these things. So let's all be human. Let's be a community and understand that this is way overboard, okay? Let the parents make the decisions, and don't hold parents hostage by a list of symptoms that every other type of sickness has. I mean, do they have is it on the list for a stubbed toe? Then let's just use stubbed toe when we call in. I mean, come on. Everything else is listed: stuffy nose, sore throat, watery eyes. Really? People got allergies. That's an entire list for allergies too. So let's get smart about it. Let's make a plan if we need one, or just go back to the way we had our plan set up pre-COVID. Let's do it as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We are going to move on to the consent agenda. I am looking for approval of school board meeting minutes of October 25th, 2021, as well as approval of vouchers number 134987 to 135289 in the amount of 1.8 million and change, and receipts for October 2021 totaling 276,000 and change. Do I have any questions or concerns? Okay, they are approved by consent. And then we'll move right into our presentations, and we'll start with our student rep report.
This month, the following classes have been taking place for the community education program: yoga, making decorative plant terrariums, and intro to IT as a career. The district is excited to be hosting indoor winter walking every Sunday from noon to 3 o'clock. Participants can get out of the lousy weather and walk a predetermined course in the hallways of Mukwonago High School for free. Look for the sign at MHS entrance door number 4. This activity will continue through February.
Parkview had many exciting athletic events this fall. 6 girls competed in gymnastics with a season-ending intra-squad meet at MHS on October 14th. 7th grade girls basketball had 13 girls compete in 8 games, and 8th grade basketball had 15 girls compete in 10 games. The cross country had a total of 42 runners to compete in 7 meets. Parkview Student Government had another successful event in late October when they challenged students to a food can drive in the Mukwonago Food Pantry. Each homeroom had a goal of 50 canned items, and school-wide the goal was 1,500 cans over 2 weeks. PVMS connected 1,604 canned items to help families right here in our community. Parkview students presented $1,616 to Jeffrey Hagenston to benefit Sets for Vets, which provides Lego sets to veterans who are struggling with PTSD. Thank you to the generous students and families who supported this worthy cause. Parkview ended quarter 1 by rewarding students following the Mustang Way. They dug deep into the Mega Mare vault and drew names out of students who were recognized by staff for respecting themselves, others, and the environment. Makers and Breakers Engineer Club had a successful rocket launch. 36 students built rockets following technical instructions. Parkview was buzzing with excitement when Ms. Sirkowski's Exploring Business students rolled out their new product ideas. They received important consumer feedback to help them perfect their business models. This month, Parkview students in flight and space classes celebrated Harvest Day. These classes actively tested edible plant cultivators to assist scientists at NASA. 28 days worth of data will help determine which plants will be considered for growth in the future space missions. Thanks to Growing Beyond Earth, Fairchild, Tropical Botanic Garden, NASA, and Mars Farms for this out-of-this-world experience.
The kindergartners in Miss Lemaster's class showed their gratitude for veterans in their own families, as well as Big Bend in the community. It made them proud to create and mail special thank yous to those who were the bravest of all.
In November, students built on the knowledge that they learned about composting to rake leaves and add them to a compost mixture in an appropriate ratio. First graders have been learning what a strong nonfiction reader does and have been practicing with their partners.
The evening of Thursday, November 11th, Veterans Day, was a special 3rd and 4th grade concert. The special guest of the evening, the United States Honor Guard, was in attendance to display the colors. Dressed in red, white, and blue, the students sang songs of the fall season and ended with a tribute to the veterans in attendance. On Friday, November 12th, Section Elementary hosted Family Movie Night. Many section families attended the event for a viewing of the Tom and Jerry movie. A hot dog dinner, concessions, and a Pop's Popcorn fundraiser were all part of the event. Family Movie Night is hosted by the 6th grade students as a fundraiser for their end-of-the-year field trip.
Rolling Hills would like to give a big shout out to Mr. Mark Stoini as his business trades class from MHS for building a storage shed for them to store their playground equipment, as well as the MASC Building and Grounds Department for preparing the spot for the shed to be built. The funds were generously donated by the RHES PTO. Thank you to all who continued to support. The Rolling Hills Elementary School will once again be working with the Town of Mukwonago Police Department during their annual turkey trot taking place on Tuesday, November 23rd. The purpose of the trot is to show the importance of getting exercise as well as to practice a school evacuation drill. They would like to give a big thank you to Elegant Farmer for donating all the apples so students and staff can finish the trot with a healthy treat. Thank you to Linda Gorman, Trainer Johnson, and the Turkey Trot Committee for putting this great event together. Lastly, Rolling Hills Student Council held an online fundraiser to support Waukesha County Adopt a Family Christmas Clearing Council. Through the outstanding generosity of their families, proceedings from the fundraiser will be used to purchase holiday gifts for many families around Waukesha County this year. Target store in Waukesha on Sunset Drive also gives an additional 10% off current prices to help the donations go even further. Thank you to Pat Falk and Melissa Barton for organizing this act of kindness for students to experience.
Prairie View is excited to share that they received a score of significantly exceeding expectations on their 2020-2021 school report card. They thank the staff and students for all of their hard work and dedication to student learning. The fourth graders at Prairie View participated in a Starbucks reading cafe. After working hard throughout their entire realistic fiction writing unit, students published one final piece of writing and shared it with classmates. They read classmates' writing and gave feedback while getting served by parent volunteer baristas with hot chocolate, chocolate milk, and snacks. Way to go, PVES fourth graders. Prairie View students had fun purchasing books for themselves, friends, and family during the annual Scholastic Book Fair. Thank you to all of the parent volunteers and retirees who came back to help out with this fun event.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our youth risk behavior survey.
So I sent you some information regarding the YRBS, which is a survey we have taken a number of times at Mukwonago High School. And so Paige Reckie, one of our guidance counselors, and Christine Bowden are here to discuss just briefly about that because we're planning on taking that in early December again.
Yeah, so I'm Paige Reckie, I think most of you know. So we put together, this is a modified version of what the students had presented to them in their advisory to kind of explain to them what the youth risk behavior survey was and why we were doing it. Probably one of the most important things that we want to stress with the students and to stress with you guys and the families is the anonymity with the survey, which is part of the reason we chose it. And we also did some trials on it with two of our students, Rebecca Thornton and Jaden Rather were nice enough, and their families were nice enough to. Yep. Sorry, I'm sick too, so it's probably not helpful. So we had those two students come down and write some pretty inflammatory responses to make sure that it wasn't gonna come back to them or show through our BARC notifications or through the system in general what their responses were and link them back to them.
I'm really excited to be this close to the microphone now that I know you're sick. So the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, like Paige said, has been given by the Department of Public Instruction every 2 years since 1993. I know it's been given here in Mukwonago several times. It's designed, as Paige said, to monitor the health risk behaviors at our high school students so that we can proactively respond instead of reactively respond. The survey allows students to have certainly to be anonymous and keep their identity private. Participation is completely voluntary, so both students can opt out, parents can choose to opt their student out, a student can choose to skip questions, students can choose not to participate, so there are a lot of options involved for student participation. The YRBS focuses on health-related behaviors that result in the most significant social issues at school during both adolescence and adulthood. It covers a variety of topics, and it also measures assets such as a sense of belonging and relationships in schools. And then that data that we collect from the YRBS is used to support the mental health grant that we received. I talked to you guys, I think, about that last month, that we received a $75,000 mental health grant this year. And so the survey results will also help support that work moving forward. Mukwonago has participated a number of times since 2011, and the board has reviewed the data collected in the past. It was given the last time in Mukwonago in 2019, and then was put on hold due to the pandemic. The students will complete the survey in early December, and then we will bring those results back to the board when we get them back, and I will bring those back to you at my next strategic plan update. And then, Paige, if you want to talk a little bit about just how it's going to be administered during the school day.
Yep. So Michael can attest to the fact that the students and the advisories were told that not only can their parent choose to opt them out ahead of time, but if Michael was 5 questions in and just decided he wasn't interested in taking it, he does not have to take it. teachers were told not to dismiss that student, that there would be no punitive consequences for them choosing to do that. They'll just remain in the classroom until the survey is done. In addition to that, when we looked at the different, there's some additional modules you can do, which have a little bit more sensational type questions. We did opt out of those additional modules. So we're just using the general one with the relatively general questions that are different choices that students would make surrounding morbidity and factors like that.
Do you guys have any questions?
When is this scheduled to happen?
December 1st?
So Wednesday, yep, the Wednesday when we get back.
And when will we send the information home to the parents?
That was next.
It's going home tomorrow, pending what happens. So
Yeah.
it's a delay send in my inbox right now.
And then there's an opt-out form that's sent along with it? All right, great.
Any other questions?
Doesn't look like it. Thank
All right, excellent. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're
Thank you.
looking at for our strategic plan update on student achievement and staff recruitment and retention.
So Stephanie and Ben are here to talk about the student achievement portion of our strategic plan, and then Stephen Williams will talk about staff retention.
So I know at the last meeting that you were apprised as to two of the elements of the strategic plan. We're here today to talk about the learning for all, which is really how we are doing on testing and how we are progressing with math, specifically math and English as a district. We did this plan again 3 years ago and set benchmarks for the plan at that time based on where we thought we could go as a district before spring of 2022 or 20. So this is where this was at. As our goal statement originally for this is the district will ensure that all students engage with meaningful learning experiences and demonstrate growth over time to ensure students are ready for college, career, and future opportunities. At the time, we did build a SMART objective that by June of 2022, so this was 3 years out in our strategic plan, that we were going to look at 3 district academic indicators. One at the elementary, one at the middle school, and one at the high school. So what you're seeing right here is where our benchmarks were at for each of those. So we chose the 3rd grade ELA scores, 8th grade forward math scores, and then ELA scores in 9th and 10th on the Aspire. So the first number or percentage there are the number where we were at 18-19 when we took a look at benchmarking it. The next number, where it says 2 after it, is where we were hoping to be by June 2022. And the number after it is where our spring testing fell for the forward exam. So clearly you'll see from the beginning that we are not where we wanted to be 3 years ago when we set those goals. It is not June of 2022 yet. We are still hoping to have quite a bit of growth in the course of this year, being face-to-face and having our students back in the building. But realistically, this is where our data is at this point. Ben is going to walk you through a bunch of our data then to try to create a picture before I talk about action steps.
Everybody's favorite part of the presentation is now the data, right? So we'll talk about this, but there are 2 caveats I want to give before we get into this, because you're going to notice some differences in terms of the graphs versus what I've given you historically. First, I think I don't have to spend a lot of time talking about how disruptive things have been over the last 2 years. So we went into a strategic plan with the best of intentions, and some of that work had to be put on pause. Some of that work was disrupted, and obviously our students' instruction was impacted over the last 2 years. So you're going to see some of that in the data. The second thing that you're going to see is 2 diverging pieces of data for 2020 and 2021 for Forward Exam and Aspire. That's because we have to look at the data 2 different ways. The blue bars that you see on there, the blue line on there, is the raw data that DPI puts on their dashboards at the state level. When they compiled their data for last year, they included the students who opted out of testing in the denominator of students, so the total number of students tested. Last year we had a higher number of students who chose to not take our state testing than we had in previous years. Last year, for forward exam, for example, grades 3 through 8, we landed at a little bit under 5% of students who did not test. Typically, we see somewhere about 1 to 1.25 of students not tested. So 4% of kids not testing and then showing up in the total number of students that we have makes a big impact on the data. So what you also see is in the red line there would be an adjusted number that I have put on there that basically pulls those untested students out of that denominator. What's the reality of what we experienced last year? Probably somewhere between those two numbers. We know that not every student that opted out would have been proficient, but we also know that in our district, a sizable number of them would have been. So that's where you're gonna see two numbers for 2020-21. I wanted to be transparent with you. Also wanted to give you realistic data there. So starting with our elementary schools, forward exam ELA proficiency. Again, I'm going back 4 testing cycles here. You can see that, again, looking at that red line, I'm gonna use the red line primarily because that's the percentage of students who did take the test. You can see that we are right in the range of where we had fallen over the last number of years. We feel pretty good about that ELA proficiency number considering all that was experienced between 2 years of testing. There are 2 cycles of testing. Going to math, you're going to see another theme here. I'm gonna go to the next slide. And you can see that we did experience a decrease there, no matter how you slice it. 2 things that you're going to notice with the math trends in the district that we believe are going on here. First and foremost, both at our upper elementary grades and our middle school, we entered or we're in the process of adopting new materials. That's a pretty complex process. It requires training with our teachers, ongoing professional development. All of those pieces were disrupted through this process as well. It's very hard to adopt new materials and then pull all the professional development off the plate like we had to in order to make sure that our teachers were providing high quality instruction for our students last year. The second part of it is that we believe that math, we know anecdotally from our teachers, the way math is taught, it's constructivist. It builds one concept on top of another. And when you see those pieces disrupted, it seems to have a little bit more of an impact on the final outcome. It's harder to fill those gaps over time. And so those are 2 of the pieces that we're seeing there, and Stephanie can talk a little bit more about what we'll do about that moving forward. We'll go to Parkview, we'll go to the middle school data, and you can see that our ELA proficiency was a little bit below where we had fallen in prior years. There is some good news within this that we're pleased with. 8th grade ELA, which doesn't show here disaggregated, we saw an increase in proficiency even despite a large number of kids not testing. That was a rarity for 8th grades in the region. Not very many grew their proficiency through the pandemic, but our 8th grade did. And so even though you don't see that in the overarching numbers there, you know, we do see on the basis of some of the ELA work that we had done, some improvement at 8th grade. You see a similar trend with math at Parkview, and again, the same rationale really holds here. In the middle of an adoption cycle, and then also the idea that math is a little bit more sensitive to disrupted learning than ELA is.
And Ben, excuse me.
Sure.
Why do you have so many more people not testing? Kids, I mean? Sorry.
The question was, why do we have more kids testing or not testing this past year? There were a couple of reasons for that, Craig, and it's a really good question. One, a number of the students that we had that were taking fully virtual learning last year, their families were not comfortable bringing them into buildings, did not want them here testing, and the only option we had for state testing was in person. DPI did not offer a virtual testing or testing away. So that accounts for the bulk of the gap there. Some of it, quite honestly, kids that were sick that could not make up the testing throughout the testing window. That's a much smaller portion of that, but primarily the virtual test or the virtual students that we had account for the bulk of that. Good question. Thank you. Last but not least is ACT, and this is the average composite score. Again, over the last 5 years, you will see that we have data for 1920. DPI didn't widely release that data because that was the year we closed. We closed schools just a couple weeks after the ACT test was administered in March, and so they kind of just scrapped that data, but those students still got their score reports. And so you can see that trend This is one piece of data that we're definitely concerned about, seeing a 1.5 point drop since 1920, or a 1.3 drop if you're looking over kind of the 1819 to 2021 data. And we definitely have some concerns there as well. That is a piece that we're going to be spending a little bit of time talking about here in a few minutes as well. Questions on any of the graphs? Okay. So just some highlights from the data in general here. Forward exam ELA overall as a system, grades 3 through 8, we dropped by a little bit more than 5%. These are all, again, numbers that DPI provided. So these are the numbers with the students who were not tested factored in. So just kind of file that away in the back of your brains. The state average saw a drop of 7.2, and 16 of the 18 other Waukesha districts that we compare ourselves to also saw a decline. In math, we saw a steeper decrease, a little bit under 11% proficiency drop. The state average was almost 10%, and again, 13 of the 18 districts around us that we compare ourselves to saw a decline. ACT Aspire, which is the 9th and 10th grade test. This, by the way, will be the last year that ACT Aspire is administered. DPI is going to be changing that test. We don't know to what at this point. So ELA, we saw a drop of about 5 points there since 2018-19. Overall, the state saw a little bit more than an 8% decline, and 13 of 16 comparable high schools in the county saw a decline. In math, a little over a 7 point, about a 7.5 point decrease in proficiency. The state saw a little over a 10 point drop, and all 16 comparable Waukesha County high schools saw a decrease as well. Again, reinforcing some of the thinking we have about math, particularly as we get to those older grade levels. ACT, it's just for comparison's sake, to stick to 18-19 to 2021. It was a 1.3 drop. Again, it was a 1.5 if you go from 1920 to 2021. At the state level, there was a decrease of a 0.5 point. But also looking at our Waukesha County comparables, we saw 14 of 16 schools that saw a decrease in the overall average composite score. I'm sorry to throw lots of numbers at you, but any questions there?
So Ben, the 13 out of 16 comparable Waukesha County high schools saw a decline. 3 didn't.
So we're studying those 3 really carefully.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, believe me, they stand out in some ways because some of those same districts saw growth or not so much recession at the elementary grades and middle school grades. So when the data became public a couple of weeks ago, that was one of the first things that Stephanie and I started analyzing, and we've had conversations with some of those school districts so that we can learn from them.
I think if you had maybe the 16 schools and the 3 that made it and the 13 that didn't, I think that would be even better. Just saying, just my thoughts. Is that over crazy?
No.
Okay.
You have to talk in the mic.
You have to talk in the mic.
I'm sorry.
And
Sorry about that.
and the ACT, we're requiring the 11th graders taking that, correct?
The ACT is a required statewide test for grade 11, yes. But we will have some students that opt out of that as well.
And we're strongly promoting trades. And
So we have talked about this in the past, that we anticipated that we would have a dip in our ACT scores as we changed our programming from the 7-period day after the renovation to at least eight options for courses, and where more of our students are taking different electives and not as many of the core courses. We understood that that was going to have an impact on our ACT. That said, that those ACT scores are not acceptable for our district. We need to do better, and we will.
But
we have some work.
Isn't there a change going on with
Absolutely.
career? I mean,
absolutely, and that's a good
Skylar
change.
would have been in that test, and he could give a rip. So,
but you're going to still encourage
those
him to
things
do well.
kind of, I know, but they affect things because he's into the trades. And that's, as we keep encouraging that in all the different career paths, I don't think we can come down on ourselves so much. And that's probably happening with a lot of employers and other school districts as well, unless they're totally,
So
hey, we've got to, teach to the test there.
last month, Dustin was here, and he shared a lot of good data for our college and career readiness. And there is no doubt that since the high school renovation, that we are doing a better job of preparing all of our students for their pathway after high school. It's not just a college-bound
Right.
programming. We get that. That said, we still can do better, and we need to strive to do better.
And you're going to convince a junior that is into the trades that we have to do better.
Yeah, I know that's hard, but I would encourage all of our students to, as juniors in March when they take that test, they don't know for certain what their pathway is going to be after high school. They may have a pretty good idea, but keep your options open and do the best you can on that exam.
Right. Okay.
And you may use that to, if you're interested in the trades, you may end up at Stout and be a project manager. And so that decent ACT score can still help you there.
Yeah, and there are even benefits to students who are going to like WCTC, for example, who can earn a baseline ACT score that will benefit them in terms of some of the coursework that they're able to do as well, too. So some of that on our end is informing students of what those options might be, too. So that's a piece of what we'll do moving forward.
But I agree with what you said, Art. I agree. It's a challenge that we face.
Have you seen any, looked at the full virtual schools and see if there's any data or correlation there with what's happening with some of those?
I have not. That's a really great question, Joel. I haven't gotten into that yet. I do know that I've studied that in past years. Before pre-pandemic years, I've had an interest in how those schools perform. They're not always great comparables to us. They very diplomatically attract students from around the state for a variety of different reasons. And when you get a mix of such students, the data just doesn't look like it does comparing us, in that regard as it would comparing us to Muskego, Norway, or Kettle Moraine, or Arrowhead, or those types of schools.
Yeah, I think I might be more curious as to what they've done over the course of the last 3 or 4 years and thrown the pandemic in with them as well to see what happened with them over time.
Yeah, take a look at that. That's a great idea. All right, so then the other piece, let me finish jotting my note down here. Okay, so the other piece then that came out just in the past couple of weeks are the state and district report card, or the district and school report cards by DPI. And this year there were some pretty big changes that the report cards had. You may have seen a little bit about that in the news. So I'm going to highlight some of those changes, but let's start with the results. At the district level, we earned 4 stars, or exceeds expectations. 2 years ago, we were at that significantly exceeds expectations. One of the changes in the report cards did impact our score for sure, probably costing us enough points to drop out of that category. But the good news is that all of our elementary schools retained their significantly exceeds expectations rating, 5 stars for each of those schools. And at our secondary level, each of those 2 schools retained their exceeds expectations level, or 4 stars as well. Going to the next slide, just talking about some of those changes, the visual changes are not so critical in terms of the content, but if you take a look at the report cards this year versus what we saw 2 years ago, or 2 cycles ago, they look entirely different. So you'll have to get your bearings straight when you take a look at those, and they've been included in your packets. So that's a big piece. They are more user-friendly. I will say that. There was a goal of making them a little bit easier for people to digest, and I think they've done that. Also at the district report cards and the high school report cards, speaking to Art's point, they have added a page for course data in terms of arts participation and program data for post-secondary preparation. Things like % of students enrolled in advanced courses, dual enrollment, industry-recognized credentials, things like that, as well as participation in things like art and design, music, and theater as well. Those do not impact our scores. They're just for public consumption only, just to report that percentage out. But it is a nice piece as we look at what we've done programming-wise to have that data on the report cards. And then third, and probably the most important piece in this, is they changed. So there are 4 priority areas on the report card that comprise our scores. Achievement, which is just how students test. Growth, which is how they grow over years. On track for post-secondary readiness, which is 3rd grade ELA, 8th grade math, attendance, graduation rates. And then what used to be closing gaps, but is now called the target group outcomes. You may remember a couple of years ago I tried explaining closing gaps, and it was a complex measurement. Basically, they looked at our disaggregated groups, so students with disabilities, students who are economically disadvantaged, racial minorities, so Hispanics, African Americans, and compared their rate of success or rate of achievement with the majority population in the state. So they weren't even necessarily comparing our students. Thank you for the wrinkled nose, because we all looked at that like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. So DPI listened to school districts, and they reformulated that into what they call a target groups outcome priority area. Basically, what they've done now is they are looking at simply our bottom 25% of students, the bottom quartile, and how are they performing? How are we growing those students? What are their attendance habits? And at the high school level, what are their graduation rates? It is a much better reflection of how we're doing. When we talk about a strategic plan about learning for all, this is much more actionable data, because now DPI releases the names of those students to us so that we can see how we've done to service those students. So it is a step in the right direction on these report cards. Unfortunately, the shift in that, again, costs us a little bit of ground, particularly at the secondary level. So we have work to do there, but again, it identifies that work. It makes that work transparent, so now we actually know what we're trying to achieve in those areas. So when you look at the report cards, if you look at the report cards, you will notice that difference. Questions on any of those key changes? And I'll just run through the rankings really fast. So out of the public K-12 districts in the state, MASD ranked 65th out of 368. That is a drop versus 2 years ago. But in terms of achievement, there's good news there. Out of the 368 public districts, even though we showed you data that showed that in some areas our achievement dropped, in terms of ranking against the rest of the state, we stayed at a high level. We are 25th overall, 27th in ELA, and 18th in math. Just as comparison's sake, 2 years ago we were 23rd overall, so we slipped 2 spots, which is really pretty good. We were actually 31st in ELA 2 years ago, so we improved rank there. And in math, we were 18th 2 years ago as well, so we stayed the same ranking there. And then in on-track and post-secondary readiness, we ranked 22nd this year. That's actually an improvement of 2 spots there as well. So again, when I talk about growth and target group areas, those were the areas where we saw some slip. Questions on the report cards? Okay.
Ben, would you mind sharing with us, even if it's by email or even with me, maybe you guys aren't interested, where we came from to where we are, just to be able to have the comparison? You have the current. I know you just said them out loud, but I didn't write them down.
I can email them all
you.
to you tomorrow. Yep.
Okay.
So taking all of this data then and taking it back to our strategic plan, originally 3 years ago, we had 9 action steps that we were going to track during this 3-year cycle in order to improve achievement in the district. Some of these we've discussed already. So one of them is just to establish the benchmarks, which we did back in the fall of 2018. To work on, this one always makes me laugh a little bit that we set this back in the fall of 2018 to look at professional development needs in regards to technology. I usually go check with that one. We were on a high-speed track to making sure that we are using technology more and in a better way for learning in the district. So you can see, and if you're a parent in the community, you know that we're using Seesaw K2 with a lot of success for our little students. Like Google Classroom and 312. That in a non-pandemic world will be a great addition to our district, because just in general absences in and out of the classroom, it's a place we needed to be, and like I said, we were just on the fast track of getting there to communicating with students when they have to be absent for any reason, that we now have a platform where students can go and make sure that they're not missing work. Because of the pandemic, honestly, our teachers did a phenomenal job during that time. We have so many videos that are posted with Google Classroom now, and things that if a student is out of the classroom that their learning can continue. Google Meets is still part of our world with students that may not be in the classroom because of illness. And then we really beefed up during that time online resources and bringing in with our adoptions online resources so students can access learning at home. In addition to that, we've expanded our Chromebook one-to-one program and technology. So now we have a pilot program where our 5th and 6th graders are even taking Chromebooks home so they can access their learning there. And Kelly's going to come in a few months to student learning and update us on that. More key action steps then. This is really the big page for me as the Director of Student Learning, work that we are doing and digging into with literacy curriculum. So we have been and will continue to spend time really looking at the statewide standards. So whatever resource we have, Super Kids, units of study, whatever resource we have, that we are really making sure that we are aligning to the standards. Ben did some great work for grade levels with our forward exam recently, where we can break down the forward exam and take a look at questions or skills, standards work, where students are regularly not successful in the last couple of years. So we're now taking that to teams and taking a look at where does our resource that we're using have some gaps in it with what the kids should know and be able to do. And we're going back and working on those then. I'm pleased to stay, going back to something Ben had said earlier, that we saw growth at our 8th grade ELA, and that team has been working heavily on this work for about 2 years now, not taking a step back during the pandemic last year. They continued that work quite heavily, and we really like what we're seeing from the data as far as that work helping us make some advancements with students in their ELA. In addition, we're doing training this year on K2 science of reading, making sure that all of our K2 staff, really, not just classroom teachers, but interventionists, reading specialists, that all of our K2 staff involved with teaching our students how to read, that we are really digging into the research, the newest research on how to create readers. And so our K2 staff is going through that training starting this year. And then finally, with our 7-12 social studies work recently, we're really having the social studies departments pick up some of those nonfiction literary skills. One of the things that jumped out to us was a definite gap in how our students were performing on nonfiction skills. And so as we did the 7-12 curriculum adoption and literacy, we are really focusing in on the social studies teachers picking up some of those nonfiction skills where they very naturally lie, and seeing if we can't close some gaps that way. So that's for literacy. 5-12 curriculum, where we do have more concerns and more work that we think we need to do there. We are continuing implementation work that did get stalled a little bit because of the last couple of years, so we continued that this summer. We will continue that. Recently, a group of instructional staff in the district met again with big ideas and had a three-hour training with big ideas on things that we know we need to go back and continue to work on. Ben and I recently met with the 7th and 8th grade team and had about an hour data review with them of, again, gaps that we're seeing in the curriculum, things that we need to dig in and work on. We're going to go visit the 9-12 math team in December and do the same thing so we can start that work. And then finally, we're trying to dig a little bit more into we're very, very pleased based on our, the target growth groups that Ben was talking about, or the target groups. We're pleased with what we're seeing at the elementary level. We grow our students, definitely at the elementary level, no matter where they are with us. We're not seeing that to the level we'd like it to be once they hit 7-12. And so we are going to dig into some of that same intervention work 7-12 and make sure that when we have students that hit 7th grade who are still showing gaps or in that bottom quartile, that we are continuing to move them at a time in life where they might have decided, I'm not good at math, or I don't really like math. What are we doing to make sure that they continue that growth? Questions at all on that work?
Do we have enough interventionists and things at Parkview to even make a difference at this point?
We do have a full-time reading interventionist now at Parkview, and we have done some work. They did some restructuring this year to have much more of a math focus in their intervention too. So we are definitely closer to where we need to be for that.
One thing I'd add too, because I have a big hand in RTI and the district response intervention. The tier 1 work, so the main instructional work that Stephanie's talking about, will also help support our lower level students as well by doing the standards work, by making sure their implementation of what we do day to day, day in, day out is better. That will be a big support for our underperforming students as well. So I'd be remiss and make sure we mention that.
Continuing then with our action steps, I'm not going to spend quite a bit as much time on these, but we will, starting in the summer of 2022, take a look at the universal design for learning, which is really a way to lesson plan, or a way to think about lessons for teachers. We're going to have a pilot group working on that in summer of 2022. We have done a ton of work as a district on inclusive learning environments and making sure that all of our students have access to our Tier 1 curriculum. That is another place that we're very pleased to see the growth in data. It was very clear that we are making gains with our special ed students having access to this curriculum and their growth within our system. So we will continue to have a focus around that with pupil services and Christine and her teams too. We did spend time in the last few years and will continue to really making sure that our Tier 3 interventions, now Tier 3 interventions are for students who have not made gains. So Tier 1 is universal, what all of our students are getting in the classroom. Tier 2 starts a level of intervention that's some students being pulled for. Some of that is happening within our classroom with our teachers. Tier 3 is when we are doing more direct interventions that are to really, really focus on a skill gap that a student may have. And so Ben has done a great job with our interventionist, really making sure that we have the materials that we need in order for those students to make gains. The common assessments, that actually was worked on very much at the beginning of this process and is pretty much in place K-12. And then the last one was part of this key action step, so I didn't want to remove it, but honestly has been moved to Christine and her work. We did recognize early in this process that the part of what could be getting in the way of a student learning in Tier 1 is behavioral issues with that student in the classroom. And so Christine and her team are digging into heavily some work with that this year with some Ross Green training and making sure that we have the supports in place for behavioral issues that are happening in our classrooms. A couple other things that I did want to mention that were not part of the 9 steps originally, things that have been in place really because of ESSER funds and due to the pandemic. Summer program, in addition to our regular summer school, was put into place this year. ESSER program called Ready, Set, Go that happened in August. We had a staff member in each building who worked together at that building to make sure that we were bringing in our kids, our youngest learners in August, to make sure that if there were reading gaps that happened during that time, that we were trying to fill those before they joined us again in September. I think all of our buildings would report that they felt like that program was well worth doing and that they definitely saw growth in students during that time. We do plan on continuing that in August this year again, in addition to our regular summer school. We did add those support positions, interventionist positions at the elementary for ELA and math support. I do monthly meetings with our elementary principals, and I'm happy to report that I really think those positions are doing exactly what we needed them to do. All of our principals went into the year with a plan for those positions, and then the data started to speak, and those plans were shifted as they should have been very quickly. For instance, we have a building where we had 3 students who came to 2nd grade who had been in other districts, virtual learning during their time in the other districts, and they were not readers in 2nd grade. And so without these positions, I'm not quite sure how we would have supported those students in 2nd grade not being readers, but those students are making gains. We immediately moved that ESSER position over to that grade level and put a ton of support in that grade level. And so we're pleased with what those positions are doing at this point. Finally then, purchasing additional intervention materials where we're finding gaps. We're using some of our ESSER funds to do that. And then finally, your question before about do we have enough support at the middle school? We are using title funds to continue to support that, and then restructured math interventions there. Questions?
I have some 4K.
Yeah.
Do you see that helping us as the kids get older here? Is 4K helping? Can you even quantify? Can you even tell us that? Is it hypothetical?
I think it is. I think it's hard to quantify with data that that's helping us because they're such little learners and we don't have a ton of data around them. I do believe it is making a difference. I think we're in a little bit of a strange place the last couple of years because we had so many parents that did not end up sending their students last year to 4K. And so we have probably taken a step back. But yes, I think it's been a great addition to the district.
Because I've heard rumors of other districts going to a 3K. I mean,
sure.
When does the madness stop, I guess, or?
So. We're not here to talk to you about a 3K.
Thank you.
We want to continue at this point, making sure that our 4K is doing what it
Yeah.
needs to do.
Thank you. I mean, this is good work, and I know the data may not always be fun, but we appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Art, I want to just chime in with one thing here. Andy Wagner is our Buildings and Grounds Director. He's watching from home, and he chimed in and said he wanted me to share this text. His son, Austin, even though he's in the trades, he used his ACT to help him get into the union and not have to take certain tests because he was proficient in those areas on his ACT. Otherwise, the union would require him to take additional classes. So tell Skylar to keep his options open.
Right, if he wants to go union. And
If he may want to, may not, but it's an option, right?
there's also employers that make sure they have you taking the classes that they want. And
Sure.
Well, that's
they
true,
put
but
you in
were you aware that unions utilize ACT scores? I wasn't. So I think that's an important thing for us to keep in mind.
there's-
all this is good.
There's branches of, well, Stephen, maybe you could tell us, are there branches in military service where there's certain positions that require ACT or SAT and proficiency in those areas to do certain jobs? I was told that.
My knowledge of that is 22 years ago.
Okay.
So I apologize. I think that the one thing that might be advantageous is you take the ASVAB, the ACT, it's a standardized test. You get an opportunity to just kind of go through that experience. So I guess that's what I would say.
Okay. I was led to believe, or I believe once upon a time I heard that there's certain positions like fighter pilots, your English score needs to be great. Why? Not
I would
sure,
hope
but
so.
keep options open. So if you're going to do that test, do it well.
All right, for the second part of the strategic plan update. We've got recruiting and retaining high-quality staff in Mukwonago. When it comes to this particular work, our goal statement is the Mukwonago Area School District will utilize best practice to hire, retain, engage, and develop a skilled and talented workforce to serve students, the district, and the community. And so just a little bit of numbers around this topic. When we take a look at the longitudinal retention percentages, we don't get lower than the 90s. And in fact, this is every staff member that came back. This does not break out who retired and who resigned. Obviously, when someone chooses to leave, there is a difference between a resignation and a retirement. This covers both sides of it. So we didn't see much of a change from this year to last. And again, I'm going to make the case here that we have really good retention, especially when we pull out the retirements, which again is choice after having had an incredible career. You choose to retire. It's different than a resignation. So in terms of the longitudinal over time, this is just total resignations and retirements. It basically correlates with the prior slide, but with actual numbers. You can take a look at the time frame around Act 10 and see that perhaps that had an impact in the subsequent years. But since then, things have regularized in terms of the numbers. Now, if you take a look at this slide, there's a little bit going on here. But when we take a look at local districts, we can easily see that our numbers might be a little bit higher. But to the extent that those are significantly higher, I'm not sure. When you take a look at resignations, that puts us at 96.1% return during the 2020-21 school year. And so that is an excellent retention rate. So as far as the accomplishments for this year, we created a new safety aide position to help out at our secondary. We ran our first support staff job fair in late August. We provided a significant 4.1 increase to certified staff wages and raised support staff hourly wages and provided raises to the tune of approximately $500,000. So those are all wonderful, wonderful accomplishments for this board and for this community. I would also add that perhaps you hired a serviceable director of HR as well as an accomplishment. So we'll go from there in that.
Well played.
Okay, all right. So with that, we do have work to do. We have need to recruit and retain support staff, which we'll be getting to later tonight. Developing a competitive compensation plan will be a topic for this year for certified staff. And as well, to support the support staff, we do have to understand exactly why folks transition when they do, so that we can use that data to improve our retention efforts. The other part as well is onboarding. When we onboard support staff, it's good for folks to begin immediately making relationships with their colleagues and community, and so working through that process is an area to improve as well. The final thing, if you take a look, we did send out a support staff offering mailer to all of our district residents, Eagle, Palmyra, and we're looking at East Troy as well. So here you'll see that we've, okay, that's not what it was supposed to do. The very last one, thank you. Last one? Yep. Is it also, that mailer also has information in terms of Dousman and also coming on board in terms of becoming a teacher on call, subbing for us. So shout out to Ben Casso and those that helped out with developing this flyer, but again, just being able to fill all of our spots, it's incredibly important. Thank you. Is there any questions?
Have we improved? Are we gaining people, or are we still looking for?
I think we're finding more. The thing though is food service. We continue to have to find food service staff to help out, but we're continuing to work at it.
Okay.
So Tom had to deliver food today.
I pulled a shift.
Short van drivers, and Tom helped out, so we appreciate his efforts.
I actually liked it. It was a good change of pace. Not that I don't like seeing Sean every day, but you know, it was all right.
As long as you don't have a career change coming.
Yes.
We're good.
Fill a vacancy.
Cross-training.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to committee updates, and Stephanie's here for our Student Learning Committee update.
Yeah, Cherry asked me to present tonight. So just a few things that we talked about at the committee. One is we continue to look at middle school and junior high learning models as part of our long-term strategic plan. The Student Learning Committee is looking at aspects of curriculum and learning and mental and social health of students depending upon models. So we continue to do that, looking at the difference between a junior high and a middle school. I did inform the committee that we are putting our K-6 social studies adoption on a 1-year hiatus, and went over reasoning of that with the committee. We will be piloting in the fall of 2022 and then adopting after that. A lot of that has to do with just wanting to make sure that the teachers are ready for that, and with another difficult year in there, it's difficult to do training for pilot materials and then make what I think is a solid decision moving forward. We looked at the dual enrollment program. Our school board policy currently has 18 credits as a maximum for what students can take in our early college credit program and our Start College Now program. Because so many WCTC programs are now going beyond 18 credits for a student to get a certificate, we explored whether or not we would want to change that maximum credit. At this point, we are going to leave it there, the committee decided. And then finally, we reviewed Neola policies with no concerns about those policies.
Any questions for Stephanie? Okay, then we'll move to Personnel Committee.
All right, we discussed adding appointments, resignations, and retirements to our consent agenda, and we've decided to keep it where it is. We reviewed some Neola policies, but we have no changes to bring for the board. We also took a look at the 22-23 calendar draft and just kind of reviewed that. It's pretty much the same as this year, correct? Yes. And then we talked about the school board elections and what the important dates are that are coming up. And we had a staffing update, which you just pretty much got, and open enrollment for students with special ed needs. We've decided to leave it right where it is and leave it open.
And we'll be bringing back more information.
Yep, more information.
Okay, any questions for personnel? Then for Finance and Facility Committee update, I believe Tom is going to do this for us.
Yep, I'll take this one for Jill just for tonight here. So we approved the minutes of October 18th. For the facility plan update, we talked about 3 things. With Bray Architects, we talked about what we would do if any changes were to ever take place at Rolling Hills Elementary, and we also did the same for Parkview Middle School. I presented a history of our Mukwonago area school district referendum results going back to the 70s when they first started, so I just shared that as an update. And then I provided a summary of all the schools that we've covered so far as we look at all of our buildings. For hazardous transportation review, we took a look at the sheriff's office's opinion, or kind of lack thereof of an opinion, as to whether West Veterans Way in front of Mukwonago High School is hazardous or not. If it's hazardous, we provide transportation. If it's not, and they're within 2 miles of their home school, they would walk. So those students, we have to review that memo as a committee and then have a recommendation to the full school board as to what to do. Do we continue to provide transportation to Fairwinds students that attend the high school and the middle school or not? We took a look at the Big Bend Elementary crosswalk on Highway 164 and Edgewood Avenue. There's a number of things we can do to improve the safety there, so we talked about what we have done and what we are going to do here in the short-term future. And then for the Neola policy review, we actually deferred that until December, so no update there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to action items, appointment, resignations, and retirement. We have none?
We have none.
We have none. Okay, safety drill summaries.
Yes, so the safety drill summaries, each year, annually, we conduct safety drills when school begins. We, at each building, the principal does a summary. You have all been given those. So we would like for you to acknowledge receipt of those through action, just formally acknowledge that you've received those, and then we sign those and submit those to the state to show that we're in compliance with what they're looking for.
I'll make the motion.
Mary
Second.
makes motion, Art second. Any questions? Everybody saw him? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Clarendon Playground Project.
Ms. Kaplan next door at Clarendon had met with me and brought a need to the table of wanting to update her playground. She has a number of students that are in wheelchairs, are amputees, or receive some type of physical therapy where they can't, in her words, these students have nothing to do at recess. So she would like to do something with her playground that would give certain students with physical disabilities the chance to enjoy recess like other kids do. She saved a portion of her budget from last school year and set this money aside for a future project, and she'll do that again this year. We estimate together that by the end of the school year, she'll have about $60,000 set aside, but the project is going to be between $120,000 and $150,000. She's asking the school board, would you be willing to work with her and more or less advance her the remainder, and she will take that money out of future budgets until it's paid in full. So she's looking for, she'd rather do it this way than to wait 3 or 4 more years until she has the full allotment. She'd rather get a jump on this now and provide for these kids sooner than later. So she's looking for help from the school board.
I would like to make that motion. We
I will
move
second
ahead
that.
with Def.
Any questions or discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Cool. Thank you.
I would like to shout out to the 1955 Mukwonago letter jacket. Is that Mukwonago letter jacket you're wearing, sir?
Can we get a look at that? Let's.
How cool is that?
That's good.
Is that your letter jacket, or did you get that from Goodwill? Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. We are going to move on to U.S. history textbook adoption.
So we did extend the process of taking a look at a U.S. history book. The U.S. history team comprised of 5 teachers, made a recommendation for student learning committee that I presented at the last student learning committee, and that is for the TCI book. A 7-year or a 10-year adoption of online materials and hardcover books would total $87,911.25. And the committee recommended that for adoption.
I will make that motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, but Stephanie, would you explain what happened with the online version of the history book? Because you deserve some credit here.
No credit, but just because of some concerns with U.S. history curriculums, I was trying to do my due diligence, and there's an online portion of the book that TCI likes and promotes because they can update it, and they can include some things that are not included in the textbook. And so I spent some time with that, and then spent some time with their curriculum team, stating some concerns that I actually had about some things that were online. After meeting with the curriculum team, they agreed to take them off the website or make some changes to them, so that I was comfortable coming forth with a recommendation on that.
So she's being very modest, but what happened is she challenged a textbook writer, a publisher, on some of the things that were online that weren't in the book, and they listened and they changed it, and that is to her credit and to very beneficial for anybody that has purchased that textbook with that online resource. So I just want to commend you for that, because we've been working hard in Learning Committee on these history books, and we've all been reading them and paying close attention, and this is kind of a big deal. It's a very big deal. So I just want to point that out and thank you for all of that diligence. So
Thank you.
we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
And then the other thing coming forth from Student Learning Committee is an LTS from each of our levels was at Student Learning Committee to present a district library media plan. It is by DPI regulation that we are supposed to have a district library media plan. It had not been updated for quite some time, and so a group worked on it this summer. At the same time, we were looking at a policy, 2522, that mentioned the board approval of a district media plan, so we actually weren't going to present that until spring after we had some time to work on the draft of that. We brought it forth anyway. Student Learning was given that presentation and recommend that going to full board for approval.
I will make a motion that we approve those.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions about them for Stephanie? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. And then we'll move on to unfinished business. We have the superintendent report.
So a look ahead to the month of December. We have our full board meeting on Monday, December 20. That leaves 2 previous Mondays for our committee meetings. So right now we're planning on Monday, December 6th for Learning Committee, and then the 13th we would have Finance and Facilities and Personnel. So I'm just checking to see how we want to make that work. You want to start Personnel at 5 p.m. and have Finance and Facilities at 6. We'll be at Prairie View Elementary to start that meeting, well, to be there for the entire meeting. Val Voss, principal, will start with a tour.
I'm sure that Andy will want earlier. So.
Earlier is fine? Or it's fine when you,
Yeah.
You can do it? Okay, yeah, fine.
So we're saying personnel at 5 on the 13th and finance and facilities following at 6.
If you guys are good with that, I'm just looking for input from you on how you want to proceed with that.
And personnel would be at Prairie View as well.
Yep.
Personnel would be at Prairie View as well.
Prairie View?
Yes.
That's nice.
Then the next item, and again, just a heads up, because we'll all want to be involved in this process, the Eagleville Elementary Charter School. As you know, Eagleville is a charter, and that's an instrumentality of the school district. So our school board needs to approve the contract or the charter that we have with the Eagleville Charter Board and the Department of Public Instruction. So a number of you have been through this process before. We had a 3-year agreement with them, and that is due for renewal in June of 2022. So Colleen Hoyne, the principal at Eagleville, and her charter board reps will be at the Learning Committee in December, and then also be at the full board meeting in December to get that new charter updated and approved by the board. And obviously, if you have questions or concerns, Learning Committee will have the first crack at it, but the full board, if there are concerns, then we have plenty of time for the charter board to take that document back, work on it, and bring it back in January, February. Again, it's due for renewal in June. Big Bend 4K, as you are aware, we discontinued our partnership with our 4K community partner in Big Bend. That was St. Joseph Catholic School a couple years ago. We don't have any other viable community partners in the village of Big Bend, and thus we would like to move forward with providing a 4K option within Big Bend Elementary as we do at Prairie View. And so we'll be bringing that to the Learning Committee as well this month. So I just want to give you a heads up that we're going to start that conversation. We'll need board approval on that, but so that's the topic to be discussed this month. At our board work session in September, you had requested that we come back and do a communication report and talk about the various different ways that we communicate with our different stakeholders, parents, families, community members. And so Ben will be back next month to give that communication update, but I was just looking to see from you guys if there was anything that you needed from him, anything that you want him to bring back. I know that was a while ago that we talked about it back in September, but we were looking to get our memory refreshed as well.
And if you can't think of it now, email it over to Ben directly or to
And that's fine.
I guess is he in charge of like all the district communication, or are there different people in charge of different sites? I would just like to know.
So Ben, at the district level, Ben would be in charge, and he can explain that, but
Okay.
obviously for the different buildings, then it's going to be different. So Rolling Hills, Ron Schlick might be in charge.
Okay.
But yeah, he can explain that. Congratulations to our fall sports programs, boys volleyball and the girls swim team. Both of them were recognized by the Classic 8 with their Sportsmanship Award for fall sports. And the last item I have, unless you guys have questions for me, would be Stephen is here to give a quick update on our COVID testing program.
For the 2021-22 school year, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services assigned accelerated labs to provide Mukwonago's COVID testing program for students and staff. The three assigned sites for this purpose were Clarendon, Prairie View, and Big Bend elementary schools. Testing began on September 10th outside the school buildings while the weather was warm enough for this to be permitted. Testing got off to a rough start, with many tests taking longer than expected to process. Accelerated labs explained that the delays were the result of state purchase tests that needed to be processed through Exact Sciences. The DHS COVID Connect program was also a contributing factor with regards to the test turnaround times. Once the state stockpile of tests were used, accelerated labs began internally processing the subsequent COVID tests, and the turnaround time improved. On November 3rd, testing was moved indoors. The Clarendon testing site was transitioned to the former high school nurse station near the Media Center, and the Prairie View and Big Bend test sites were moved into the foyers at those respective schools. As a part of this change, testing was directed to be conducted separately from areas students and staff use. Equally important, accelerated staff was directed to leave the building when administering COVID tests to ensure potentially sick individuals would not enter the school buildings. To date, numerous staff and students have used Accelerated's testing service as a convenience, particularly as Accelerated has improved the turnaround time. In the below chart, the monthly usage of our testing facilities for students and staff of origin is shared. And so there's a following on the next page, a pivot table that breaks out the results of, not results, but the sum of PCR tests and also the antigen tests that were run by month. So for total PCR tests since the program started, we're looking at 1,193 tests, and for antigen tests, 804 tests have been administered.
So when do we put an end to the test, the testing? I thought it was a bad idea to start with, just saying. I don't think the community appreciated it. I think we did a bad job explaining it. But when do we end the testing in our schools?
I mean, that's a fair question, and we can have that dialogue. I don't know if you're asking for that right.
No, I think we should have
now.
that discussion.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions for Steve?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, so for board president report, not much except that the Wisconsin State Education Foundation Education Convention is coming up January 19th to the 21st, and it is back in person. Last year it was virtual, so those of you that would like to attend need to just let Sean or Laura know, and they will get you registered. I know you are aching to go. Right, Craig?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you there.
Aren't we carpooling?
No legislation and correspondence? Okay, so that is all that we have in open session at the moment, and then we're going to move into executive session if I have a motion.
A motion.